Okay, we might go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, I'm Shari from Australian Organic. Lovely to have you all along. Thank you for joining us in this second webinar in the 4-part series. A lot of you have returned from the first one, which is terrific to see. I hope you enjoyed today's one, get some good takeouts from it. You'll receive the notes and slides shortly after this, a day or two later. As always, we're happy to receive any feedback or suggestions on future webinars that we can hold, so please send them in if you have any suggestions. Thanks very much. Enjoy the seminar, and over to you now, Annie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Annie from Round Square Marketing, and I'm helping Australian Organics facilitate these workshops, and this is the second one in our 4-part series. So today you'll be meeting Bruce, the General Manager of TSBE's Food Leaders Australia, to talk to you about all things export and workplace safety. And then Anthony from Robertson Scannell will also touch on taxation and business planning, particularly in this current landscape. So I'll introduce you first to Bruce, and he can get things started for you all in his discussions. Okay.
There we go. It's actually great to be in an office with people today as isolation for us. We've gone back to work this morning. So it's actually great to be back here at the moment. So hopefully you can all see the presentation there, starting there with workforce safety. So there we go. So I'll click through now. And I suppose what I want to go through is surviving COVID and what that means for your supply chain and your businesses. A bit of a, why am I speaking on this? So TSBE, or Toowoomba and Strat Basin Enterprise Food Leaders Australia, is a membership-based organisation. Overall, we have around 450 members. 180 of those are directly within the food supply chains. And put simply, we help businesses innovate, export, learn and network. So what you're going to go through today is learnings that we've had throughout our supply chain, the biggest learnings that we've had, and how we're working with government and international supply chains to make sure we have effectiveness going forward, and what individual businesses can do to survive this pandemic and come out the other end ideally stronger than what they went in. So absolutely first, and it goes without saying, that the number one requirement of the pandemic is to look after your staff. There's a whole lot of reasons why that is, but the biggest one is obviously their safety, but also maintaining strong employee relationships with them. What we're definitely seeing there is those companies who have been very clear on the guidelines and making sure they adhere to them to remove any greyness in the operational procedures of their businesses are getting the strongest employee relationships and in fact are building their staff engagement during this period. And of course you need to be for that yourselves, but also your employees need to be across every single specific requirement of the workplace and understand the why as to why that's in place, and ensure that when visitors enter your site, they're treated with the exact same requirement. If anyone has been following the news and saw Donald Trump through a Ford facility in Michigan, you can see how it blows up when a visitor does not hit the requirements of the company and the brand PR that can go with it. Now, further, we are going to see continued cases of live COVID-19 throughout our community. Just in the last week, we've seen cases in regional areas in central Queensland, in WA, we've seen in regional Victoria. Just because you may be regionally based or you think you're outside of major metropolitan areas, in fact, we're thinking there will be cases where clusters jump up due to people, I suppose, being a little apathetic to the requirements. So the greatest threat to any business right now is a live COVID case. So we're asking businesses to ask, do you have a plan to deal with it? What we're seeing across it is that the vast majority of businesses have a great plan as to how to meet the requirements, but do not have a security plan in place or a contingency plan in place if they get a live case. So can you isolate a workforce if you get a live case? And can your business continue to operate? We saw it in Victoria with the meat processing plant. The whole plant had to shut down. We've seen 15% of the American red meat processing sector shut down due to the fact that the live COVID cases were seen in plants and they were not able to isolate specific workers. So how can you do that? One is staggering shifts. If you've got boning rooms, if you've got facilities where there is a natural isolation happening within your workplace through different rooms, making sure those groups of employees don't mingle at lunchrooms, don't mingle at when they walk into car parks. So you can audit and show an auditable process to health inspectors if you get a live case that yes, you can maintain a workplace. Further, there's people out there at the moment who are building spare workforces and using consultants such as the food industry people or DGT or Agri-Labour here in our region to build spare workforces that are ready to come in and keep their businesses operational if a live COVID case is there. So just understand the rules. Don't just do the minimum around minimising the risk of getting into your plant. Have a contingency that if you do get it within your plant. Now, this also then goes on to marketing. What we have seen in America, particularly in international markets, but even out of Victoria now, is a clear lack of evidence or clear evidence of lack of market demand where a workforce has failed to contain COVID or has got a live case. What that's meant is significant lack of demand for their product due to the public and their consumers seeing perceived food safety risks because of COVID. Now, while we know there's no evidence of that, they are asking in their head, if a COVID case got into that plant, what else has got into that plant? And we're seeing lack of demand and poor reputational damage. Right? So these restrictions should be maintained within your business, not just because they're good health practice. It is a very good marketing plan. And we're seeing many businesses looking to actually maintain them long-term, well outside the restrictions of government lifting restrictions to ensure that they continue to have good brand perception within the market. Now, keeping supply chains open, and this has probably been the biggest challenge of COVID. There is massive issues across the supply chains, but the main point I want to make here is that you are not alone in the risks to your product or managing the risk to your product getting out to consumers. Every single person who touches your product could damage your brand if they do not do it. Have you completed a risk audit across your supply chain to ensure that all your supply chain partners are managing the risk that is yours to your product effectively? Worst case scenario would be a wholesaler or a distribution centre having COVID cases and your brand being linked to that as something that comes through there and you having bad brand perception. So please look at doing a risk audit on your whole supply chain. Again, as I said, it's about reducing the risk of negative publicity. And if one of those facilities did shut down due to a live COVID case, are you able to move to a new facility? Do you have relationships in place that would allow you to get your supply chain back up and running as quickly as possible if one part of your supply chain, integral part of your supply chain, is no longer able to operate? Now, probably for those who are exporting here, and that's sort of our expertise at TSBE, the biggest distinct disruption we're seeing right now is by sea and air freight. Getting, obviously, air freight more importantly than anything else. So as passenger planes have stopped and all that freight capacity that would normally go into the feeder passengers or underbelly has been removed, we are seeing a significant shortage of capacity to get air freight product into market. We've seen people now, significant changes in the way we're slaughtering animals and the way we're boning them and processing them to freeze them or send them to different markets. We're going to be really clear, this will not be short term. And this comes down to the tourism sector. We won't be seeing any passenger planes of any quantum into key international markets for quite a while right now. So you've got to ask yourselves, are your freight forwarders getting you the most cost-efficient freight? With all of the options available, have you yourselves looked at the IFAM or the International Freight Subsidy Mechanism and seen the routes yourself and are asking those that look logical to you whether your freight forwarder is aware of them and are they using them? And are you working with them to look at new freights or new ways of getting product to market? And it may be worth driving competition to that market at the moment to see who's getting it. Companies like DHL and others have their own planes flying around the world. Can you get your freight forwarder to put your product on their planes to get it into market? Again, this isn't going to be short term. You need to do your research yourself and make sure that your freight forwarder is looking after you in those areas. Now, in saying all of that, that disruption means that people are struggling to get product to market. So we are seeing through Trade Investment Queensland Network throughout the world at the moment, there is massive opportunities for exporters who can solve their logistical issues quickly in opening new markets because many people cannot. So invest in the research and get connections that would give you market opportunities earlier than others. Talk to Trade Investment Queensland regional directors in your regions. Talk to the commissioners internationally and see what demand they are seeing for your product and whether you can open new opportunities right now. Trade Investment Queensland has also opened up a free program allowing businesses to use international students, getting 120 hours of free research to look at new markets for you. And they'll look at logistics, your product against consumer demand and price points, taking it for what it is, and that's student research, but it's a great way to do some key desktop research on key markets you may wish to look at this point in time. Lastly, diversify your markets. So in the international space, diversify your markets is going to be a big one. As logistical challenges keep coming up and we see new COVID cases and new issues around the pandemic cutting supply chains and constantly disrupting it, the ability to move your product to different markets at different times will be key to having flexibility and therefore sustainability in this marketplace. So TRQ and Austrade are reporting strong demand still exists in a whole lot of markets. Use this to strengthen your business, diversify your risk across different markets. And lastly, on a domestic play, what we're seeing is the businesses that are coming out of this really, really strong have spent this period building a strong domestic following. On the lack of freight coming in and international competitors coming in, they've been able to really grow good domestic support and create marketing campaigns around good domestic support, which has meant their export risk or their exposures to the logistical challenges is somewhat reduced. So that is key. Now, lastly, my last slide is what will be the long-term impacts out of this COVID. What we are seeing is a nationalist agenda in manufacturing and the like, i.e. many people who would do part of their processing happening in other countries are moving it back to Australia to de-risk international logistical issues and also health issues occurring in other countries. And consumers are looking for more confidence. I said before that COVID cases are hurting brand perception. If you're able to maintain a clean, green, safe image during this, track and trace technology, provenance technology will be able to see you get increased confidence in consumers and therefore increased brand acceptance and more markets. So we're looking at adopting that technology more, and we're definitely seeing, particularly out of the Asian network to the north of us, definitely a greater adoption of track and trace or provenance technology, whatever you want to call it. But also, what are your potential weaknesses going long term? The current market disruptions will be long term. There are some businesses out there. Oh, I don't know whether I'm still presenting. Yep, camera's still on. If you're working in supply chains at the moment, I've spoken to many of my members who are saying they're probably just at break cost in some of their export markets at the moment because they want to maintain relationships. What we're saying to them is these disruptions are probably going to last 1 to 3 years. Are you prepared to take that loss in that market for the whole period, or are there profitable ventures that you can enter into now that will be long-term sustainable for your business? So we're definitely seeing, as I said, in some export markets, loss-making decisions to maintain relationships with no review of whether that relationship is still a long-term one to maintain. We're asking just to look at those, understand your relationships and which ones you need to cull, review, look at price increases or maintain. And you may find there are ones that have actually increased profitability and sustainability to you at this point in time that you want to may change the weighting of where you go to different markets. And lastly, as we're getting into this supply and logistical issues, who can you work with to obtain scale? So today in Toowoomba, we just had a regional trade distribution centre development application approved by council going to construction by October. We'll have a custom built facility to allow the consolidation of small loads into large ones to get freight efficiency for exporters. Who can you work with in your region to do that, to again help solve your logistical issues and go in with buying power to your logistical partners and your freight forwarders to get you the most efficient way of getting your product to market. So to recap, look after your staff, understand it's more than just an OH&S issue, it's a branding issue, and review all parts of your supply chain to see whether it's still right to be working on those, and do you have risk mitigations in place regarding the COVID pandemic, and if a case was to hit any one of your partners. Now, I'll hand over to Robbins and Scannell here and make sure they go through everything that they want to go through in tax. and then come back for questions at the end. Thank you. Anthony.
Thanks, Bruce. Good morning, everyone. So I'll be talking today a little bit about grants and assistance that are going to be available for you, which is a very fast-moving area. I'll also be talking about some tax tips that have come out of the COVID stimulus, and I'll then just talk a little bit about recovery planning. So my background is from a Queensland farming family, cattle, up in the North Burnett here in Queensland, and one of 8 kids, second youngest, so was shovelled off to university to do my accounting degree many years ago, and I've been doing accounting and business advice for way too long ever since. So we do all the usual services of tax and compliance and financial planning and that sort of thing, but we also have a ever-growing business advisory arm, and we've certainly been using those skills in the last couple of months. So we'll get right into it with the what assistance is out there at the moment. So most of you would have seen from a federal point of view the Cashflow Boost for employers and the JobKeeper. They've been the 2 main ones that really have saved a lot of businesses from very dire effects of the COVID-19 period. The Cashflow Boost, you didn't really have to do anything except lodge your BAS, and obviously the JobKeeper one, you had to enrol there and meet all your eligibility, and I'll talk about that a little bit further in the presentation. Just note, I was putting the slides together on the weekend, and to put it into 2 or 3 slides, there is literally pages and pages and so many grants and assistance and announcements that have been made over the last few weeks that there's just not a lot of detail out there at the moment. So you've really got to do your homework and act fast when it comes to any grants and assistance that are out there. Some of the ones that I've identified is really ones that I thought might be of use to you today. With there's state government ones here for supporting apprentices and trainees, federal government, where you can get up to 21,000. Assistance, and you would have seen this one on the news, and it was really an announcement. There's not a lot of detail there, but $1 billion set aside for affected regions, communities and industries, and part of that was $110 million for the agriculture and fisheries sector, for export of produce into key overseas markets, and that sort of thing, with the idea medical supplies would come back on the return flights. So that one there, we need some more detail to come out on. There's been a lot of different loans that have been available for people to get. Some of those have been subscribed, and then other announcements of further funding coming. The SME guarantee scheme that I've got there on the slides, that's where the big 4 banks have offered that finance to COVID-affected businesses, and the government have backed that. So it's just been a lot easier for businesses to attain that because it's government backed. There's been some relaxation of insolvency measures. I hope you're not at that point with your business, but where ordinarily you'd have to go down that path of insolvency, there has been some measures to give people more time, so you don't have to do that. The Black Summer Innovation Program is just one that I found when I was researching this, a grant of up to 25,000 if you've been affected by a global disease outbreak, which I would have thought this pandemic would qualify for that, and that's with Food Innovation Australia. There's loans for exporters, 250K to 50 million. That one there was an announcement that came out. You possibly would have seen the rental relief, which was a federal government announcement for landlords to basically have to give rental relief to their tenants. A code of conduct was put out with leasing principles. Basically, the spirit of that code is landlords and tenants should work together. but then each state government has had to come out with the actual legislation around that. So just moving on to and I'm trying to, Annie's helped me out there, we've got onto the next slide. With the state and territory governments, I did these slides on the weekend and I've put be very, very quick. Well, I can tell you now the Queensland Small Business Adaptation Grant for 10,000 has closed for applications. So it was basically came out, I think it was on about Wednesday and was gone by Monday morning. So you need to be very, very quick with any of these grants that do come available. The states also have their own stimulus packages, and I think the media's done a pretty good job in telling everyone what these are about. But the important message with those ones is a lot of them you actually have to apply for. There's not some of the grants with the federal level were automatic, like the Cashflow Boost, but say a payroll tax waiver of 25% is what the Queensland government is offering if you've got tenants that are affected paying their rent. You need to get on and apply for that. And importantly, you need to pass on the benefit of that waiver to your tenants. There's all sorts of different licence fees that have been waived and deferred in the hospitality industry, for example. So you really need to do your research there. Childcare, preschool, kindy, the benefits there that people were given. And I think Bruce mentioned that you've got to look locally for this sort of assistance as well. So up here, just to the west of us here in Toowoomba, the Western Downs Council came out with a free business advice grant for their area, where you could get a couple of hours with a firm like Robertson Scannell, but a local firm out in those areas, which was great. You need to be looking at all your electricity, water, registration fees to see if you can get any relief there. And then there's some crisis relief available as well if you're in a bad way. The next couple of points there, I think most people would be aware. I'll skip down to the last one, the loan repayment deferrals. So this one here with the banks has had a high take up with businesses that we've been talking to. So that's where you can go to your bank and get 6 months deferral on your loan repayments. You just got to be very mindful there, and this is where the business planning and recovery comes into play. It's not a loan repayment waiver, it's a deferral. So at the end of 6 months, the interest for the 6 months will be charged. And this is on term loans and fixed interest equipment finance loans as well. But basically at the end of 6 months, you'll renegotiate whether you're going to add that to the loan or pay it at that time, extend the loan. It's quite open-ended. So a lot of grants and assistance available. So my message at the bottom of that slide is follow social media, search online, read the 1,000 emails you get on all this. Use your industry bodies like TSBE here in Toowoomba that Bruce is from. Register your interest and really act fast is my message there. Just on the JobKeeper, I wanted to talk about this today because I think talking to people, there could be a few people that are eligible and have just assumed that they're not. I've been talking to a lot of clients in the last few weeks and months, and you'll ring them up and say, are you eligible for JobKeeper? And they say, oh, no, my turnover hasn't reduced by 30%. But they're not looking at the correct, and that's for people under $1 billion, which is the billion turnover, which is the majority of people. And they're looking at the wrong comparison period. So they're looking at, okay, my turnover December, January, February was X amount, but it hasn't dropped by 30%. The test is on 2019 figures. So if you're looking, the three basic tests are March 20 versus March 19, April 20 versus April 19, and then the June 20 projected quarter versus June 19 actual figures. So that there has been a bit of an eye-opener for a few people, and we've applied for plenty of people that didn't think they'd be able to get it. And a lot of people aren't aware of the alternative tests. So if you don't meet one of those basic tests, you can apply what's an alternative test. So I've listed out the ones there that are available. your business might not have even been in existence back in March and April 2019, or you acquired your business since then, you had a restructure, even if your turnover substantially increased leading up to the test period. So in March and April 19, if you were turning over $50,000 a month, but you'd got it up to $100,000 a month in February, and then the COVID-19 hit and you've dropped back down to 50, on initial glance, you haven't reduced by 30% because it's 50 grand last year and 50,000 this year. But you can apply different measures there to make yourself eligible. And that's well and truly within the rules. And from a producer's point of view, if you were drought affected in 2019, you can go and that means you didn't have a lot of income in 19, so you haven't had the 30% reduction. If you're drought declared in 19, you can go back to 2018 and compare the figures from that period. And if you were drought declared back in 18, which a few people might have been as well, you can go back to 17. So there's quite a lot of opportunity there for people to be eligible for JobKeeper that they're probably not aware of it. And you don't have to be an employee or don't have to have employees to get JobKeeper. You can get it as a business participant. There's eligibility there, but basically for sole traders, partnerships, trusts, companies, which a lot of the listeners might be, you can get it as a business participant for yourself. Now, if it's, say, a partnership, you can't get it for both partners, but you can get it to one. It's limited for one participant per entity. And look, you can't, there's other eligibility criteria, for example, there you can't have a job and be getting paid wages and then go and get JobKeeper through your business. So my best advice regarding JobKeeper is to get some advice, because it's not as simple as what a lot of people think that it is. All right, so just some tax tips coming out of the stimulus package at a federal government level more than anything. There hasn't been a hell of a lot. I think the government's going to have a hell of a job trying to balance stimulus versus being able to pay for what they've offered with JobKeeper and all the other costs in the next however many years it's going to take for us to recover. But at the moment, they've increased the instant asset write-off to $150,000. And that's a really good deduction for businesses. So basically, if you spent $149,000 on a tractor, for example, you can claim the whole lot in that year. Just needs to be installed and ready for use before 30 June. And really importantly, I haven't seen anything where this is going to be extended beyond 30 June. So that instant asset write-off at the moment is legislated to drop back to $1,000 come 30 June. So if you're going to, if you think in the next 12 months you may want to buy a piece of equipment, and it might be worth considering to do it before 30 June. The next one was proposed. I haven't seen the legislation come out, but it's more about like the old investment allowance. It had to be new equipment. So with the instant asset write-off, it can be second-hand, but with the next one, it had to be new and you could claim 50% up front. And then for everyone working from home, which I think is, most of the country, you can claim 80 cents per hour for the work you do from home, which is just diary evidence. So there's not a lot you need to keep for that one. All right, so just moving on to talking quickly about some business recovery planning. We've been using this model here: survive, pivot, adapt, and then hopefully thrive. So I think most of us have been in the survive mode at the moment, and that's where your JobKeeper and your Cashflow Boost come into play. But they're not going to last forever. Their Cashflow Boost basically goes through till September with your BASs, and the JobKeeper's the same. It's legislated to go through to September. So in that period, you would have done things to survive. Hopefully you've done a waste audit. So that there is very simply going down line by line through your expenses, through your costs, and just trying to trim any expenses that you can. We've done it here at Robertson Scannell. And you may have done some planning. So we already, and we've done one-page plan is sort of one of the things that we work on here at Robertson Scannell. We use the now, the where, and the how. Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? And how are we going to do that? And previously we would have been doing one-page plans 12 months and 6 months. I can tell you now, through this period, we've had 1 month and 2 week one-page plans just for people to get through this period. So that's the survival mode. When you're heading into the pivot adapt, you want to make use of grants if possible. I put this in the slides on the weekend, and of course this grant has now gone, but you're going to need some help for your business to be able to get out of this period. So one of the things we've looked at is, and Bruce touched on it himself, is you really need to look at your products and services and how you can pivot and adapt and try and enter into new markets, sell existing products into existing markets. What can you do differently with your products and services that you weren't doing before? Because the world has changed. It's going to be different. And as Bruce said, it's not going to be a short-term change. The world has changed, and it could be the same 3 years, it could be 5 years, we don't really know. But the idea is, with this matrix, is what can you do differently? And I would have thought as part of that is reviewing those supply chains, looking for pain points and where you can improve that supply chain as well. And cash flow modelling is the other thing that you really need to look at in this pivot adapt stage. Is cash is king, I think, as most people realise, and you've really got to be looking at, okay, my cash flow might be okay now because I've got JobKeeper, I've got Cashflow Boost, but how's that cash flow going to look in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 12 months' time? And moving into the thrive stage, that's where you've really got to reset your business. And again, look at what you can do differently, what you've learnt through this period. I think a lot of people, working from home has been a big change for a lot of people, and the use of technology and how they can adapt. But looking at your previous experiences and what you can do differently. And I guess, again, my advice is to get some advice. So Robertson Scannell are here to help. We're more than happy to take calls on this, but if you've got your own advisor that you've been working with closely, get in contact with them and get some help. And my last slide is something that I've used, and I know a lot of people in our business have used, that in order to come out of this and thrive, you've really got to focus on the things that matter and the things you can control. There's been a lot of energy wasted, I think, with all the information that's available out there, that people seem to get a bit wound up that, oh, look, a job seeker gets an extra $5.50 a fortnight. Why do they deserve that? And why do people getting JobKeeper get a pay rise? And why there's a whole lot of things with the government stimulus that people don't agree with. Things that matter, things that you can control are what you should be focusing on. All right, thanks very much.
Okay, thanks everybody. Now we're going to open up for some Q&As with both Bruce and Anthony. So if anyone wanted to pop their questions into the chat or into the Q&A, please do so. Give me some time to pop anything in there.
$110 million back.
Bruce just has something to add.
Yeah, so Anthony mentioned the $110 million for agriculture coming out of the $1 billion announcement by the government. That goes through what's called the International Freight Assistance Mechanism. Now, what that effectively doing is going directly to the airlines to subsidise them to allow the prices of air freight into international countries to be as close to what it was prior to COVID as what it is now. So we were seeing, previously $1 a kilo or less pre-COVID. At the peak, we're looking at $13 a kilo for air freight. We brought that back. One thing I will say is today, very live, there is a Singapore airline flight looking to get out of Wellcamp within a week. at freight rates at about $1.60 a kilo out of that. So if anyone here is actually having issues getting in freight into Singapore and wants to have regularity at very commercial rates, happy to take conversations on that one because that flight will probably be up and running within about a week, and happy to link you directly in to get guaranteed capacity onto that flight. So that's how that $110 million is being spent. And to be fair, it's nowhere near capped out yet. They're still got work to do on making sure all the services open up and they get back to true freight capacity in the air freight market.
Any questions from anyone? Feel free to pop them in the Q&A or into the chat. Give you a few minutes to do that if you can think of anything that we covered that you might like some further clarification on. Can Bruce talk a little more about track and trace initiatives, please?
Yeah, okay, so we're working with probably 6 different ag tech companies at the moment, all from different stages, from ideation right through to people who are absolutely already fully adopted into market and being used by companies like A2, Blackmores, New Zealand Lamb, etc. So what we're seeing is that consumers, and not so much the consumer directly, but those who are selling their products, so the supermarket chains, the wholesalers within our international markets, are wanting to make sure that the product they get is able to stand up to every single claim and have nobody to audit their supply chains independently and come up with faults they were not aware of. So they're looking for digital solutions that allow the tracking and trace from either ideally paddock to plate, but even just from processor to wholesaler, that will allow surety on things such as, did it definitely come from the port in which you say it came from, or the label says it came from? Was it kept at below 4 degrees or whatever the required temperature is? Did it ever get a G-force shock higher than it needed to do? Did it go through the destination ports that you said it did? I.e. it wasn't rerouted through a country of risk or one that there's trade embargoes or something on. So there's technology out there now, GPS locatable technology backed with blockchain technology that will allow brands at very cost-effective rates to be able to go to a wholesaler and say, I can provide you Australian product with absolute surety and the data chain to give you that confidence that product is real. We know that about 6 in 7 Australian steaks eaten in China is not Australian. All right, so if you've eaten Australian beef in China more than once, you've almost certainly at one point not consumed Australian meat. And they are and all markets are very aware of this counterfeiting, and they want to make sure they've got certainty, particularly as our clean and green brand image has taken a massive growth during this period due to the success of our management of the Covid-19 outbreak. How do we do that? We need to adopt these technologies, and we need to see how they work within our current processing facilities. And there are many out there that are just a barcode. Scan the barcode and it will link back, and the self-obsoleting, i.e. they'll time out within certain periods of time, but they are wanting more than that now because that can still be replicated. We are working with Data61 at a CSIRO where we can actually do genome testing on product in market to prove that it came from Australia. And there's other really high-tech information like that at a higher cost for the really premium products. And for that might be seafood, etc. But for the red meats and the grains and everything, this data logging per container or per load is probably where we're going to end up. And we hope that those products will be in the market broadly within the next couple of months. There's already a couple, such as Escavox in the horticultural market, already doing this. Ag Live is already doing this in the market in the red meat sector. And there's Smart Codes out of New Zealand doing this for some big brands in New Zealand that are ready to work with Australian companies to jump on, and happy to provide introductions to anyone who wants to go through what that can mean. As I said before, with pandemics, and particularly we're seeing, the one that's gone under the radar at the moment is the African swine fever. That is probably for protein markets by far a bigger disruption than COVID. They are looking for confidence in their food supply chain, and these technologies will be key to, I think, getting premium in the short term, but even just getting market access in the long term. So that's my more detail on that.
Thank you, everyone. Any other questions for either Bruce or Anthony before we let you all go and have some lunch? All right, well, if you have any other questions, I know that's a lot of information for everyone to sort of intake in 30 minutes. So if you have any other questions after today, please just email them through to Australian Organics, or Anthony and Bruce's contact details are also at the end of this presentation if you wanted to get in touch with them directly. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you could take a lot of value out of today, and we look forward to seeing you all in next week's edition around going digital. Okay, see you.